With breaking news and political commentary from a public servant, serial entrepreneur, community leader, philanthropist, and American patriot, and a darn nice guy. It's time for the GrassRoots TruthCast and your host, Gene Valentino.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another edition of Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast. We do this once every week, once every 2 weeks, and we try to bring informative, inspiring innovations, political, social issues. You pick it. We try to put it on the air. We're broadcasting live from our hangar in the man cave in Pensacola, Florida, behind one of our favorite toys that traverses over the bay of Perdido Bay and the panhandle of Florida. We are really trying to delve into something very serious this time. This is being filmed on June 2nd, 2023, which about a week after the Memorial Day weekend. The Memorial Day weekend, a time when we should be honoring the veterans. We're talking today about people who have passed, people who have not passed, come home, but were seriously injured, mentally or physically as well. And no better person to talk with us about this other than Lieutenant Colonel David Glassman. Thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming to the GrassRoots TruthCast. The concern when David and I met, it was really clever. David had a strong military background. I was a county commissioner at the time. He was in my office as an elected official doing some projects with me, and we became pretty good friends. And so what I hope we capture in today's show is not only the perfunctory issues of the day over the past year and what you're doing with this magazine we'll billboard in a second, but some of the personal experiences that you've been through and why you're in AHERO in the first place. Folks, the magazine is called AHERO Magazine, the living legends of real people who've lived and died for our nation, and some that have come home with their own stories that are featured in the magazine. Quite the story. David, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Depending on the branch of service, over 31% of the service members have developed post-traumatic syndrome. Explain that.
Well, PTSD, as it's referred to, post-traumatic stress disorder, which, as an organization, we have a problem even with that name. It's not really a disorder. A disorder is something that you're typically born with. Really, these are injuries. So it really should be named PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, in my opinion. And there's plenty of significant data and information, evidence that would suggest that. So, for example, if you get your bell rung pretty bad, that's an actual brain injury. A TBI is what it's called, or referred to in the military, a traumatic brain injury. So, when you go off and do great things for the nation under such incredibly stressful environments and circumstances, it's very typical to come back with any number or any range of post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury through surviving through IED, improvised explosive device blasts, seeing horrific, absolutely horrific things on the battlefield, such as the loss of a friend, or seeing your own having lived through your own fear sessions, if you will, that can be sustained. Firefights can last for a long period of time, and these things are, once you are experiencing them, once you go through it, you can't just will it away. It's now becomes part of your past, and so these veterans, these service members are coming back having been exposed to extended periods of high stress, high threat environments, and there's just all different types of experiences that they're having.
Like what? What kind?
Well, direct engagement with the enemy on the battlefield can, like I say, last for seconds, minutes, hours, some cases days. Then there's also the concept of there is no behind enemy lines in certain theaters of combat that our service members are dealing with. So while they think that it's a safe zone where they might be in, but it can, at any given time, combat can break out, right? And then when it's over, instead of dealing with it, instead of seeing a professional, or instead of having some recovery time, the expectation of the military and of the unit commanders is, well, you survived that one, now go back and do it again the next day.
Yeah.
And so it's compounding and amplified through extended periods of, in the case we're talking now, extended periods of combat environment.
Okay, you set the hook. You got people interested in this, especially if you're a military veteran. You're going to want to hang in with us. But before we go too far, give us the plug on the magazine.
Well, the magazine is pretty unique in that it represents the organization America's Heroes Enjoying Recreation Outdoors. And we have a very small staff. In fact, I'm the editor-in-chief, and Connie Conway is the senior editor. She happens to be my mother. She has 50-plus years in editing, writing, and publishing business.
That's a good deal.
Yeah, and she's heart and soul into the project. And so it's nice to have something that I call our glorified business card, our glorified calling card that says, hey, this organization is saving lives through defeating suicide through what we call our secret sauce, which is relationship building. And contrary to what we see out in the medical community and the psychological community, if you will, is there's an overwhelming trend to get to pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical protocols that essentially say, okay, you've been through this, you've lived through that, you've engaged the enemy, you were physically and or psychologically injured on the battlefield or in a training environment, or as a first responder, you went into a burning building and you were unable to save the life of a young girl in the shower, for example, which is a real world event that took place here locally in Gulf Breeze. And that firefighter had to go in after the flames had been put out and pull that charred young girl's body out. And he, in this case, could not get over the sense of loss and the sense of regret that he couldn't get through and save that human life. And so all these things manifest themselves differently in each person. And what we see in the healthcare community and in the VA healthcare system is this kind of overwhelming trend to try to get towards a pharmaceutical solution to the problem.
Yeah, I don't believe, it's amazing you brought up the pharmaceuticals so quickly, because I think that's a consequence of some other issues that are more repugnant to me. I think it's important that the military person have a buffer, an outlet. The gentleman or gentlewoman coming home from service needs a buffer in the transition to back into society.
Yes.
That, to me, is a little rusty and is in constant need of improvement, especially today during these social and political changing times.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns I have, Dave, is that a hero may be the buffer. Is it not a source for people to go to say, hey, I need to get on board and become part of this team, so I can not only learn from the experience of others, but maybe you got a number in this magazine?
Oh, yeah.
How can they reach you if someone is suicidal and needs some help? What do we do?
Oh, you just go to AHEROUSA.org and you can hit the donate button if you want to donate to the cause. You can hit the information, email, send an information, or you can call the number in the footer of the website, and that'll get a hold of somebody in our staff, and we can address issues. But you bring up a really big point in the fact that the Department of Defense, that I am a product of, 22 years in the United States Marine Corps, and I am retired, I'm not active duty, just to make sure your audience understands that. The DoD is just absolutely, or has been at least in the past, absolutely world-class at making warriors from our young American men and women. On the flip side, after making that warrior through a training process, through an indoctrination process, through weapon systems familiarization and instructional process, on the back end of that, after going to combat and doing whatever they've done for however many years they do it, what we do is we basically say, okay, you're done, have a nice day, and we put you out into the civilian world. Now, typically, about half of our service members get enrolled in the VA healthcare system. The other half aren't. There's no safety net for the other half, and that's 9 million of our veterans in this country are not enrolled in the VA healthcare system. 9 million.
Why is that?
Well, there's so many different reasons. A lot of people just associate themselves with the bad stigma or reputation of the VA, and they say, oh, I don't want that. Or they say, I'm still young, I'm fine, I went off to combat, I did these things, and I'm just fine. I don't need that. Leave that to, give that service and that support to somebody who needs it. And that's a problem within the veteran, within our egos and things like that. And so my point here is that, like you've brought up, is organizations like AHERO offer that transition, that gap filler that says, hey, come to us, meet our staff, participate in our events, because that's what AHERO really is. It's America's heroes enjoying recreation outdoors. We do hunting and fishing events, and really it's just we just set the hook. We give them the event to get excited about, but then we get to meet them. And what we're finding is that taking time with a fellow veteran or active duty service member or first responder and getting to know them and breaking down the barriers to communication offers the opportunity for them to get real about what the problems are. And when we find out what the actual problems are with a given veteran or first responder, we can then reach out to our network of what we call sister veteran support organizations, like Project Warhorse that does equine therapy, or like Healing Paws for Warriors that takes rescue dogs and pits them in a 6-week program with a veteran, and they build a lifelong friendship with that service dog. And Warrior's Heart, which is an organization out of Texas that offers world-class drug rehabilitation and recovery services for our vets. So we make that connection through putting on the hunting or fishing event. We break down those barriers to communication. We get to know them, and we apply real solutions to real problems. And nowhere in that formula that I just talked about is this need for Paxil or Xanax or any of that. And so what we're finding is that on the pharmaceutical side, on the traditional healthcare side, we're finding an overwhelming rate of prescribed opiate-based pain meds and antidepressants, as opposed to let's get them into an environment where there's relationship building and there's problem identification and problem solutions being offered.
I distinguish the veteran and the homelessness of veterans from all other homelessness. When you look at the 6 o'clock news and see how our sanctuary cities are being overridden by homeless people, only to find out that a certain percentage of them are veterans, is probably the worst, is the most embarrassing thing to me, and the biggest insult to our veteran. So many of them, I remember back to the Vietnam days, when you had them coming off aircraft home from Vietnam and being spit upon on their reentry into the society here in the States, is a shortcoming of our American condition that I think needs improvement. That's another issue. But at Congress level, I see an immediate need to maybe getting the political elements there to improve the Veterans Administration by taking the VA system that some of these vets are not going into after service and allowing them to follow the normal medical system that exists outside of the VA and still get full treatment. And I've been told at a lower cost. Have you heard about that alternative, other than the VA being an alternative for the veteran?
Are you saying as far as NGOs, non-governmental organizations, offering these services?
Straight medical services, but a reimbursement as if they were in the VA, because the private medical system was more responsive than the holdups that many vets became suicidal over, going and waiting painfully through the VA process.
Yeah. I mean, I think the VA, and I'm certainly not an expert on the VA processes, claim situation and how they do their referrals. They do have, I think, what's called a community care program, and I'm actually a benefactor of that. I am fully enrolled in the VA, and frankly, personally, the VA has done a great job in handling my personal situation. A lot of the relationship between veterans and the VA, it's a give and take, and the veteran has to hold up his or her end of the bargain. You have to show up for appointments. You have to go through certain processes. You have to fill out paperwork. You have to do certain things.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and so assuming the veteran plays by the rules, so to speak, of the process, then the community care program, again, don't quote me on the name of that, but that allows for the VA to recognize a individual situation and say, well, we have this service for this issue or this ailment or this injury, but you have to go to Houston to do it. However, since you're here, we can refer you out in town to get this type of health care. And that happens quite frequently. So, it's not a perfect solution, but they do offer the ability to get care out in town.
We're talking with Lieutenant Colonel David Glassman, retired Marine, from the Pensacola area. Dave's become a good friend of mine over the years, and you're watching Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast. Where can they go on your website to subscribe?
Yeah, it's AHEROUSA.org. Please visit the website. Check us out. We've got some pretty comprehensive videos there and opportunities to get involved. We are what I call a small footprint organization. We have a small group of very dedicated volunteers, but AHEROUSA.org or .com for that matter. And as far as subscribing, we actually don't offer a online subscription for the magazine as of yet. That's kind of our goal for phase 2 of the magazine. We have 8 editions, as you have so generously showed your audience. This is from a while back, and so now we have 8 editions, and we're looking to get into phase 2, which is to kind of set the stage to transition the magazine into a subscription-based publication. For now, it's basically a free magazine that we give out locally. And we do offer through our little card campaign here the ability to sign up, help out the organization for $10 a month. We send the 2 editions a year to the donor. And we also send, of course, an AHERO ball cap, an AHERO t-shirt or fishing jersey, and an AHERO challenge coin if you sign up for the $10 a month or $120 for the annual subscription sign up.
You're not for profit, but what is your focus with what you're doing? Bringing the veteran that's suffering to a solution. Wouldn't that be the simple answer?
That is a simple answer. We de-escalate the circumstances that the veteran are realizing in their moment of need. And so when a veteran gets in touch with us, either through a family, a friend, a referral, or they see us on the website, on the internet, they contact us, and our goal is to say, look, just come be with us, come spend some time with us. We de-escalate, and then the answer for the veteran or service member that says, okay, well, thanks for the fishing trip, thanks for the hunting trip, what's next, AHERO? And up until 3 or 4 years ago, we didn't have an answer for the what next, but over these last 3 or 4 years, our answer to the question, what next, is a series of outdoor-oriented vocational opportunities that the veteran or service member or first responder can engage in, receive some professional instruction in things like wild firefighting, prescribed burn association, tall timbers, land management, all those kinds of things that we've partnered with certain agencies in the state of Alabama. And so we're offering, we also have diving for AHERO here in the local Pensacola area here, where we're creating teams of veteran certified divers to go out and partner up with the Escambia County Department of Marine Resources and an organization called Ocean Strike, and they can go out and essentially work on their killing proficiency by killing the lionfish.
Oh, the lionfish is just overtaking the waters, and it's eco-hazard now.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the vets helping out with many of the local agencies. When I was in my earlier chapter, I was the commander of the county's search and rescue dive team. And it's all volunteer, and many of the vets were offering to volunteer as part of their requirement in service. And I had several veterans on the search and rescue dive team, and it was amazing to me to see the stresses even the veterans experienced in occasionally having to pull a dead body out of the water. But the ability for them to participate and feel constructive in their purpose was so important in the recovery. And one of the things I never quite understood that was mentioned in the detail, over 59% of the people with homelessness are 51 years of age or over. And then also over 125,000 veterans have died from suicide since you've been reporting this. But the other fact that I found most interesting was that over 40% of female veterans were reporting or experiencing sexual harassment, and now possibly suffering from some sort of sexual harassment trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about those factors?
Well, I certainly don't, I wouldn't get into the numbers, although I agree with the numbers that are being reported. MST, or military sexual trauma, is, in my estimation, and from the people that I've spoken to, is a rampant problem within the active duty ranks. And
rampant problem?
Yeah.
I can see 1 or 2% stepping out, but rampant is 40, 50%.
Yeah, my observation, and it's not through personal, so I'm not speaking from personal experience. I'm speaking from talking with people that have come to AHERO with their issues, and we'd like to think that people are honest with us. And I would go so far as to say most women in the armed services deal with varying degrees of harassment, in some cases in many cases trauma. There's just a boys club mentality even to this day, that it may have weakened or lessened over the years, but it's still present.
But did it have to become woke for, at the same time, could we not have had a military that created equity and parity for the women, but not having us get weak and woke in the process?
Yeah, I would.
You understand my distinction?
Absolutely, and I would keep that distinguished, right? These are two entirely separate matters.
I mean, one has really nothing to do with the other.
Agreed.
My point. Yeah,
agreed. The woke thing, in my opinion, that is through infiltration and corruption at the leadership level of all elements of government, specifically the Department of Defense. But that's a whole nother topic for another day.
Is. And let's come back and talk about that. Yeah. I think a lot of the stress of the military veteran might be a consequence of this standard that they're not willing to accept. Yeah. Or I should say, they're willing to accept it and having trouble tolerating it to the best of their ability. That doesn't mean they have to like it.
Right. Yeah, I feel like we're constantly using our military for social experimentation. And in this case, I feel as though it seems as though it is a deliberate attempt to weaken our military force. And when you pair that with the relatively recent tendency to spend an incredible amount of resources on foreign wars, such as what's going on in Ukraine, it's really hard to get around the thought that there is some sort of intention going on to weaken our military force, at the same time that we have open borders, at the same time that we're forcing, mandated vaccines down with experimental gene therapy inoculations as opposed to FDA-approved medications or vaccines. And it's really hard for folks like yourself and me to kind of grapple and make sense out of these trends that seem to be cross-cutting all of our major departments of our federal government and penetrating down to the lowest levels of us as community members and citizens. It seems like there's a real attempt at a weakening of our nation.
Is this what let's talk more about that, because is this a denigration from within, or is there an outside force that's injecting itself into the mores of our fine military standards? I think back to the toughness of General Patton and the movies and all of the hardcore old days of military, where you learned your disciplines, and many of those disciplines carried forward into life, which helped many retired military actually in their disciplined way. Said economic business culture standards came out of a discipline from the days of the military. We're talking with Lieutenant Colonel David Glassman, retired Marine. This old dog here has been a friend of mine for over 25 years and has some very vivid stories he can share with you. And you can reach David through our website as well, GeneValentino.com. When you get there, go to Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you go to your podcast platform of choice and give us the thumbs up and comment on what it is we've been giving. It helps our podcast of viewership. It also gets you in the system so that we can keep you informed of other great shows we're going to be having here on the GrassRoots TruthCast. David,
Yeah.
How come 80% of the veterans are having trouble transitioning since Vietnam?
Well, obviously it's a complicated problem, and there's lots of different factors. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that, the veteran has a level of ownership and responsibility in that transition. So it's not always an outside source of confusion or difficulty in making the transition. A lot of times we as veterans kind of create our own problems. And so having said that, I would say that the largest part of the problem rests with the DoD's, or the Department of Defense's, process of creating warriors through a long duration of training and instructional time on the front end, giving them all of these experiences, and in the last 20 plus years exposing them to all of this high deployment, high op tempo plus combat operations. Some of our warriors are doing 5, 6, up to 10 or 12 combat deployments in a 20-year period. And then on the back end, it's cut and run. And the transition really isn't a transition. It's night into day, okay, or day into night. It's however long you're spending in uniform with the institution essentially at your back, providing things like housing and lodging and meals and things to do and mission and focus and all these things. And then all of a sudden, it's over, and now you need to transition out. And the DoD does not have a back-end transition other than a 1-week course called TAP, right? Transition Assistance Program. And you sit in these classrooms and you get bombarded with information about what you're supposed to do, how to transition, how to engage in, different things of civilian life. And it's a fire hose effect that I actually went through twice because I was afforded the opportunity to do it. But I learned very little from that. And so many, if not most, of the active duty are transitioning out in a very rapid format, and they're not able to get the types of skills and transitional benefits, if you will, that they could otherwise if there was a more comprehensive transition program out of the DoD.
That is probably the most succinct thing and the most comprehensive thing you could bring forward, and we could bring forward to our congressmen and women, for change in the way the military is viewed and its purpose. We're going to be taking a 2-minute break in just a second, but to end on this point in this segment, David, it's what if you mentioned there's a shortfall in the way we transition people back into society. The effort made by our military to train and discipline and create intestinal fortitude in the character of individuals and their minds, not to mention their physical being, to becoming good soldiers for this, protecting this nation, is the same intestinal fortitude and discipline we ought to use in the military to train the military veteran looking to get back into private life, and to do the things that you were suggesting through AHERO. Why not using them to help with discipline in training in the classroom, discipline in special projects or trades that they're going into after the military, actually becoming proactive in a transition program tied to private business, the 3P, private-public partnership, and letting the military be one of the legs in that triangle to help that veteran gentrify back into society, is, to me, I think, a missing component right now that we should. Let's talk about more of that when we return. We're going to take a 2-minute break. Gene Valentino on the GrassRoots TruthCast here. We'll see you in about 2 minutes with our guest today, Lieutenant Colonel David Glassman, retired Marine, here on GrassRoots TruthCast. Be right back. Hi, everybody. Gene Valentino, founder of Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast. This segment is the opening segment of 11 segments to follow. The 11 segments will be each of the amendments to the Second Bill of Rights to the Constitution of the United States, which I've written as suggestions to improve the governing democracy, the democratic republic in which we live and work today. You know, the Constitution of the United States is a document written to protect the people from the overreaching government power, the overreaching government hand. And it's supposed to be able to unite people based on respect and individual liberty and freedom. It presumes that our government is one that succeeds, that governs less, not governs more, meaning of the people, by the people, and for the people. The republic, which is why we call it a democratic republic, has more to do with the concept of a decentralized form of government. In fact, in the early days, our founding fathers reached out to the different states of the nation in just that way and asked them to sign on to this thing called the Declaration of Independence and then the Constitution. And to do so, it was a way of gathering the many together of different cultures, different religions, different ways of life, and asked them to form one united America. It was a difficult challenge, but one that worked and has worked longer and better than any other governance in this world. But over the decades, over the 2 centuries, and more so recently, we've seen an acceleration of dysfunction, bad behavior, deceit, treachery, and abuse of that beautiful democratic process. And for that reason, I've proposed this second Bill of Rights. This second Bill of Rights complements the first Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and the 17 more. A total of 27 amendments to the Constitution exist today. This Bill of Rights I propose is the second Bill of Rights, 11 more amendments to the Constitution. I'd like you to sit back and join me. Take 1 or 2 of these in sequence. Obviously, you'll find them on the website, which is where you've seen this, www.genevalentino.com, the second Bill of Rights on the top tab toolbar of the website. The first one and the other 11 will follow. Stay tuned. Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast. Our guest today is retired Lieutenant Colonel David Glassman from Pensacola, Florida, Marine who's publishing a great magazine geared toward veterans called AHERO. Dave, the website is?
AHEROUSA.org.
So look for it, subscribe, and make sure you get on his list. It'll be a digital copy in the future, but there is a hard copy today you can enjoy. It's geared toward the protection, toward the what I would say the service of veterans, men and women who have found themselves in a homeless situation, PTSD, suicidal issues, and a general transitioning problem in getting back into society after serving this nation. I couldn't think of a more valuable purpose and cause than to be doing this after your 20-something years of Marine service. Good for you, David.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Talk about AHERO again real briefly and what you think the top 3 priorities are that you're going to be focusing on to help the veteran.
Yeah, I think AHERO is an organization that really prides itself on offering opportunities for our active duty service members, our veterans, and our first responders now. We've opened up all our programming to first responders to come and spend time. And spending time is just a couple of words, but it can represent some incredible and therapeutic opportunities when you put the hook in front of the veteran or the first responder. The hook being a hunting trip up at our lodge up in the Shorter, Alabama area. We have access to about 100,000 acres where we do various hunts, turkey, deer hunts, hog hunts, quail hunts, duck hunts. And then down here in the Pensacola area, I run the fishing trips, and we invite the community of boat owners to take small groups of veterans out deep in the Gulf of Mexico. And you just can't really quantify how important the relationship building aspect of the organization is in terms of de-escalating a set of circumstances that a veteran or first responder might be experiencing. And then from there, that de-escalation and that relationship building, we're able to identify real problems. And then we have this network of other organizations that offer solutions to those specific problems. And then we like to answer the question, what next, with vocational opportunities that lend a sense of purpose through licensing or certification or training opportunities and outdoor-oriented vocational opportunities.
David, I see from your notes that over 76% of the veterans have trouble transitioning from military life back into private life. Mm-hmm. Is it because of the trauma they experienced in combat, in service, or is it just simply a transitioning problem on their part because the handoff from such specific skills in the military to a business corporate way of life is so diametrically opposed one from the other? Where's the disconnect in the transition?
Well, it's not an either or, and obviously all of this is very variable and dependent on the individual and the individual's circumstances, family circumstances, what their training and their background was while they were in the military, and how well those experiences and skill sets transition into the civilian sector, depending on what they want to do when they come out of the military. And, we talked earlier about that transition period, and I did want to mention that the Department of Defense has really taken a strong step in that transition direction with the Skill Bridge program, which allows for transitioning service members to engage in up to 6 months of a professional vocation that they will engage in their civilian life when they get out, while they're still being paid by the DoD. So there are efforts. This transition thing that we've spoken about already has been recognized by the DoD, and they are putting efforts into helping with transition. So, again, it's individual based, circumstantially based, but there is this is what we did in the institution, and now we're in the civilian sector. And so on a broad level, I think there's just really significant differences between the way the civilian sector operates in terms of business community, entrepreneurship. A lot of those things are just not experienced in the DoD because the institution provides everything.
That is the basis for medical care, even through the VA after they retire from the service.
Yeah.
But there's over 54, 55% of the folks are just not even using all of their medical service after they get out.
That's exactly
especially
right.
When they're homeless. Why would a homeless veteran not use the medical services that the VA is providing? As problematic as the VA is, it's certainly something better than nothing.
Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
what's that disconnect?
Well, again, everyone's different. Everyone brings their own circumstances. Everybody's experience in the military is different, and how they manifest those experiences during the transition and after the transition. A lot of times we have the divorce rate is skyrocketed, right? It's massive, and so these things compound themselves after taking the uniform off, with the rigors of transition, with the nature of personal relationships at the marital level, parenting, the ability to hold down a job as opposed to what they did. So depending on the individual and his or her experiences with respect to homelessness, a lot of times we experience veterans that say, you know what, I don't want anything. I don't need anybody's help. I did this, and this in the military. I was trained at this level, and I got this on my own. And then that has a way of going down a path of bad experience after bad experience, and then they find themselves not enrolled in the VA, not being employed, not having a particular skill set that's employable, and having an attitude problem, and a reputation, a stigma attached to what they think is the VA. And so now they find themselves, and they don't know how to get out from underneath themselves.
In the last few minutes we have, let's take a big giant step backward, or apart from what we've been talking about. Outside of AHERO and your fine publication in particular, if you could have it perfectly your way, I guess, what would be the ideal situation to remedy the suicide issue, the trauma issue, the homelessness issue? Is it government-based policies that need to be reinforced or established in cooperation with that partnership we talked about with government earlier? If you could have it, Mr. Veteran of 20-something years, what would you like to see different if you could have it perfectly your way?
Yeah, to simplify it in just a few seconds or short minute here, you have the Department of Defense, the single largest expensive budget in the federal government, and you have the VA, which I believe is the second largest. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we make warfighters here, and we theoretically take care of the veteran here at the VA. There is another federal department, and I would argue that under different circumstances at the governmental level, meaning if the government was working in the best interest of the people, which in my opinion, right now, that's an arguable point, right? But it seems to me that there should be a federal agency that answers to we the people, that its function is to do the transition work. Again, we make warfighters in the DoD. It's not the DoD's responsibility, nor are they ever going to take on the responsibility of deprogramming and transitioning the millions of warfighters that they've produced. It's always going to be about fighting in our nation's battle and defending our borders, right? Then this VA healthcare system is not about transition. It's not about finding jobs. It's this amalgamation of all these things that is mostly focused on healthcare through basically pharmaceutical and or surgical solutions. And there's a big giant gap between the two federal programs. There should be a transition program, again, that's answerable to we the people, to the veterans, that is focused on job training, focused on understanding process with respect to healthcare, focused on things like homelessness and other aspects that basically, of the tens of thousands of non-governmental organizations that are out there, that's basically what our organizations are doing. We are that transition.
You're the conduit.
We are the conduit.
Yeah.
But it's so we don't have the backing of the federal government to say to spend money on marketing. So the rest of the world doesn't know about AHERO.
It needs to be statutory and legislative based for that to really affect the policy to get that underway. And, you know, the libertarian might object and say, well, wait a minute now. We want less government, not more government. But is there no better cure to reduce a lot of other government and social spending by coordinating that transition that doesn't exist now, which creates so many other social and community level expenses for us?
You know, I will never argue the point we want less government. I agree wholeheartedly. But, you know, the less government thing is really, in my opinion, is a manifestation of improper use of government and corruption and, you know, things like payoffs and kickbacks and government contracting the way that it's set up. And so, again, my solution is not, I don't believe it's an entrepreneurial base, because then it becomes a profit motive. And we don't want this, in my opinion, I don't think the transition needs to be driven by profit. It needs to be driven by a sense of success and accomplishment in those metrics of transitioning.
Totally agree.
So if the government can work in a better fashion with less corruption and more answerable or answering to we the people with oversight, right now we can't get Congress to oversight. Even though their job is oversight of our intel agencies, there's no oversight going on. There's nobody answerable. It's a topic for another day.
Yeah, but it sure is. Well, we have lower spending, but we still have deeper debt because of interest, and that's another topic that ties into what you're saying. It has to be coordinated and cohesive.
Yes.
We're talking today with Lieutenant Colonel David Glassman, a retired Marine, with his program, his magazine called AHERO. David,
AHERO magazine.
Give him a shot of that magazine. AHERO magazine. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to do more of this, because some of the projects I know you've been involved in the community, really hands-on, have such deep meaning and are so heartfelt.
Yeah.
You know, it's heartfelt. It's not only the civilian looking at it from the outside, but it's the It's the military veteran whose heart's being warmed, whose life is being saved.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Whose life is being saved from your good efforts. And I commend you for that.
I appreciate it.
Bravo to AHERO and your willingness to channel and focus all these non-government agencies into a funnel of services for that veteran who desperately needs a pathway towards the continuation of his good American way of life.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us today on Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast. Remember, go to www.genevalentino.com, go to grassrootstruthcast.com, subscribe, and give us a thumbs up. Make sure you tell us that we're doing okay. Give us some comments and criticisms, constructive criticism, on what we can do better. You got a guest who might want to compliment what David Glassman's just been talking about regarding the veterans. Let us hear from you, so we'd have a episode for you ready in the future with social, political, and community-oriented worthiness. Thank you for joining us on another edition of Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast.
Thanks for joining us for Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast. Be sure to like and subscribe, and God bless America.